Back in 1977, I was 13 years old. We had a snowstorm. I lived in a place not very far from the border of Niagara Falls and Buffalo. They got hit really hard. Um, we referred to it as lake effect snow that would come off the Great Lakes. It literally shut down major cities on the U.S. side and the Canadian side. It was so bad we had to open a window and we had to get our shovels and dig our way out. And we dug a path from the house to the garage. The snowmobiles, we had three of them, were inside the garage. And one we were currently working on. So me and my dad jumped on one, fully outfitted in our snowmobile suits, helmets, gloves. I mean, we had a layer system that was unbelievable. And we just drive around our city, is what we did. The restaurants were offering free food and to anybody that wanted any. Now, you have to understand, back in those days, okay, we didn't have, you know, internet, cell phones. We didn't have anything like that, nothing whatsoever. So you communicated by calling people on the phone if it worked, your landline, not a cell phone, and you were glued to a TV. Most people had rabbit ears, or they had some form of antenna on top of their house. Right away, everybody got out and started getting on their roofs, and you'll see here, getting that snow off the roof. If they didn't, your roof would cave in because the houses weren't designed for that. So it was go crazy, get the snow off your roof, then get yourself going out toward the street. I think there was, I don't know, like 60 people that died, and they froze to death in cars. Some people were walking down the street and froze to death. I mean, a lot of the deaths were stupidity, but nobody was used to it or even knew what it was. Some businessman confronted my dad and wanted to drive him from our city to Hamilton, which normally is a 2 hour drive by car. And there was two businessmen, and they were paying my dad quite handsomely. My dad didn't want to turn that down. We'd already been driving our snowmobiles for at least, I don't know, a good 10 hours, delivering food, checking on people. Anybody that had a snowmobile was. The people came together like nothing you ever seen with helping each other. But this guy offered such a handsome pay that my dad didn't want to say no. So we drove two businessmen, gave them snowmobile suits, and took them to Hamilton. Literally, it was like an hour, maybe an hour and 20-minute drive on a snowmobile, wide open. I mean, our snowmobiles could do 80 miles an hour. It was nothing how fast our snowmobiles were. My dad had a snowmobile that when it got stuck, you just cried because of how heavy it was. I mean, it had heated handlebars, heated seat. You could light a cigarette. It had a cigarette lighter in it. I mean, it was considered the Cadillac of snowmobiles at the time. He paid a lot of money for it, too. But I drove, it was a Ski-Doo is what it was called. We also had a Yamaha back then. But, you know, I'm almost, 60 now, and I was 13 then. But 40, 45 years ago. So we did get the businessmen dropped off. Most places we didn't pay for fuel. Everybody was giving fuel away for free. So that was kind of nice. But literally when we got back home, we slept for like, I don't know, maybe 4 hours, maybe five. I think it was four. And my old man woke me up and said, "You ready to go again?" I said, "I'm ready. Let's go." And threw our stuff on, and out the door we went and started delivering food to the elderly. We delivered fish and chips, Kentucky Fried Chicken, pizza, You pretty much name it, we were delivering it to people to keep them fed until this thing was over with. Everything was down for a good week and a half before things started opening up again. And like I said, no internet, um, no nothing of the convenience you have, no Facebook, none of that stuff. Where now you can keep track of storms by the moment. Back then, I mean, they gave us a warning a storm was coming, but 2 hours later, you looked out the door and you went, "What the hell is this?" And it was just unbelievable. You'd come out and see your neighbor standing there, and he'd look at you and say, "What do you think of this? I just hope the furnace don't break." A lot of people were saying that. It was super cold, super cold. Even with 3 layers on a snowmobile suit on a snowmobile boots, there was still a little bit of a chill, especially if you got along the lake or someplace like that. If you were in between the houses, it wasn't too bad. You would actually, you could drive right over, you were driving over cars and didn't even know there was a car under you because there was so much snow. It really was ridiculous. When you see a photo like this, that's lake effect. That's when the water is pulled off the lake and it freezes almost as if it's hitting the house. It looks kind of eerie, but it usually happens along the lakes. And that picture there is pretty much what it looked like. I mean, you could almost drive a snowmobile over top. Now, there were some people that lost their snowmobiles. They fell into a crevice. So they would be booming and they would be going, and then all of a sudden, there'd be a crevice and the snowmobile go right in. And we would end up seeing guys walking and waving and trying to wave you down, and you'd pull up and you say, "What's wrong?" He'd say, "I lost my snowmobile. It's in a crevice over here." We say, "Really?" So we go over there and kind of stay as far back as you can from it and take a look and say, "Wow, I don't know if we can get that out," because there was no way. The snowmobile was just too heavy. Even if you hooked a rope on it and pulled it out, you'd probably just sit there and spin. So basically, the snowmobile was there until the snow melted or till they can get something in there. But you offered the guy a ride home, saying, "I can give you a ride home, but there's no way we're going to yank that out. I don't care if we put 4 snowmobiles on it." And it was just down too far. So we drive the guy home. I don't know if some people died from doing that, but there was a lot of accidents that happened too. Like a lot of guys be driving a snowmobile, be moving along at a pretty good clip, and all of a sudden, they come off this kind of hill of snow, and boom, there's a transport truck there you'd run into. I mean, everybody just was kind of careless and crazy the way they drove when this thing went on. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a lot of fun. I mean, driving behind people's backyards, all the fences were covered. I mean, it was like a snowmobile's dream. It really was. So, and then you had problems with trees. Trees would all snap off too. That they were everywhere, and that was a problem because then people lost power. So now your TV didn't even work. Your radio didn't work. And a lot of people didn't have heat at all. Now, some people back then had wood fires, is what they had. And you can see they're just buried. That's it. So, medical service were just taxed beyond belief. Volunteers everywhere. Volunteers everywhere. Just not me and my dad. I mean, we're talking thousands of snowmobilers that were out there. And anybody that could get around had snowshoes or cross-country skis, sleds. By the time you got the third or fourth day, people were pulling sleds with food in the back to give to people. The help was there, but it really became help because of the community. The community came together. I'm not sure that would go on nowadays because of how selfish people are. But like I said, back then, no phone, no internet, no nothing. I mean, it really was a much harder time. And I think most people my age, I mean, we didn't call ourselves preppers or anything like that. We just prepped for weather. I mean, we always did. Extra blankets, sleeping bags, water, you name it. I mean, I'm guilty of it now. I mean, I'll go in my truck and I'll say, "Where's that 5-gallon jug of water?" "Well, we're only going to Nashville. It's only 2 hours." I don't care if it's 2 hours. I want the water in the truck. It's not that big of a deal. Because every time we leave or go out, I mean, I got to fill up one or two and put them in the truck. Can't leave them out there if it's wintertime. It'll freeze. And even in the summer, I do that too. Like, a lot of people take things for granted, and I learned that in this storm. This storm stuck with me for, I still remember it like it was yesterday. And people that don't prepare their vehicle are just foolish and stupid, and they're just waiting to get themselves in a fix. And that's all there is to it. Water being number one and the most important. I mean, you can go 3 or 4 days without food. You'll be a little hungry, but it's not that big of a deal. A few bars is fine, but water is more so important than anything else. If I'm only going, a couple hours, there's 5 gallons in the vehicle. If I'm going longer than that, then there's 10. It depends on my distance and where I'm going. But the summertime's horrible. Like a lot of people, if you had to get out of your vehicle, say in the summertime, and it was 90 degrees, could you do it? Do you have a hat? Do you have a sun hat? Do you have a little bit of basic equipment to keep the sun off your head? You can get a sunburn from the wind if it's real windy. I mean, it's amazing how delicate your skin is and how bad you can get a sunburn when you think you can't. And that makes for a very uncomfortable walk. But me and my dad during this storm, we must have picked up, I don't know, 40, 50 people easy from their vehicles. And their vehicles were gone. They climbed out their windows. And we threw them on the back of the snowmobiles and we went. Now, we carried an extra snowmobile suit with us, so when we had to carry a person, we could do that, and it was like a 4X. It was huge, so it didn't matter who we picked up. But there was times we'd pick up a woman and a kid, and we'd put both of them inside the snowmobile suit. And then my dad did the same with the father and another kid, because most people had 2 kids. But you try to get as many as you could on that snowmobile and get them to safety, is what you do. And sometimes when the phone lines were working, there would be calls going into the restaurant saying, we need food, we're hungry, we have no heat, we need help. And whatever they could get out, next thing you know, we get a message when we go pick up some food. It'd be like, there's some old lady, she has no heat, and she's got no food, and she doesn't know what to do. That's what they were telling the person that asked for food from. So we would load up, and there was an area where you could go get blankets. We'd drive there with the food, get the blankets, and then we'd drive to their house, and we'd write it down, and we'd be like, we got to go back and check on this person in 2 hours. And that's what we did. We would go back and ask if they're all right, how everything's going, and check on them. Everybody was double and triple checking on everybody because of how cold and how horrible that storm was. There's no pictures of me with it. I mean, back in those days, you had to pay to have your pictures developed, and that wasn't cheap. We didn't have digital pictures like you got now. And, when you took a picture, it had to really, really mean something to you, because it was going to cost you a good buck. And I've only got, I think, like 20 pictures of me when I was a kid. My parents just didn't want to spend money on that, and that was all there was to it. So the only people that really took a lot of pictures were photographers back in those days. But we didn't have digital or video or any of that stuff back in those days. So, in a way, we kind of got screwed a little bit on that, because most people didn't take pictures. School pictures were a big thing to watch your kid get older, but there really wasn't that much in the way of photos going on, because they were very costly. And even if you search the 1977 snowstorm of Canada, or Niagara Falls, New York, or Buffalo, New York, you'll find out there's not a whole lot of photos out there. There really isn't. People weren't taking photos. They really weren't. They were too busy surviving, bringing food, blankets, water. They were just too busy doing things, is what was happening. But you figure, no internet, no TV, no social media, and they survived. What? A few, 30, 40 that didn't. And yet, even today, when we have big storms, you still hear about people dying, even when we have all this equipment. And the biggest thing I had to worry about in Canada were snowstorms. That was the biggest thing. And that really wasn't a big deal when you were used to it. And then when I finally came to Tennessee and seen what tornadoes do, I was like, oh my God, that's the right hand of God. That's unbelievable. And it all happens in a matter of 1 or 2 minutes. And there's been people in my town here. I've talked to a few of them because we got hit with a big one a few years back before I was here. And the one woman I started asking questions to about it, she started crying. She couldn't talk about it. It was so devastating to her. And I believe she lost a family member too. But these people told me it comes in like a freight train, and you literally have seconds to take cover. And they said, you've never seen anything like it. It's literally somebody just went crazy, like a nuke went off. And they found it very hard to talk about what it's like because of how devastating it was. Because they said when you come out after a tornado, if you survive, what you see around you, you'll just shake your head, not know where to start. And it's very devastating. Now, I've never lived through a tornado yet, and I have a tornado shelter, a bunker, we call it. But I'm probably much better off than most because of building this, and it gives you peace of mind. But one thing's for sure, all these storms have been happening before internet, before social media. And here's something else that's interesting. In my town back in Canada, we had snowmobile stores everywhere. Snowmobile mechanics. I mean, it was booming, that business. And then as the years matured, it finally got to the point where I think it was like 10 years later when I started getting I was 25 or so, my dad started selling the snowmobiles. It just wouldn't snow enough. He was originally going down this river, and he would travel that way and then go camping out there and roast hot dogs and hamburgers and stuff like that with the uncles and the aunts. But it finally got to the point where it wasn't even keeping the ice anymore. So it was like, sell the snowmobiles. And they were mentioning global warming back then. And everybody just ignored it. So all the companies that did snowmobiles, the businesses shut down. And I imagine they went further north into Canada. But no, this global warming has been going on for quite a few years, and now it's getting really bad. And now the storms are basically tripling. Everything's out of control. So it was quite interesting to watch what that did. But snowmobiling was a lot of fun. 4 months of go was just unbelievable. My mother would not ride on the back of me with the snowmobile. She used to tell my old man, she says, he's crazy. I can't ride on the back with him. He just goes too fast. And I had no fear at all. We'd go through some heavy duty drifts, and I'd put that machine, 10, 20 feet in the air, come down on some powder. And I mean, it was just unbelievable. I'd go down the ice on the river, and that was a big river, and go around the corners hanging off the end of the snowmobile with your kneecaps almost touching the ice. It was crazy when you were younger. You just had no fear of anything. I never ever got hurt on a snowmobile. Never got hurt at all. But those were some good times when I was younger. But I guess because of these storms, I'm just extra prepared because I just don't want to have my ass hanging out in the wind like I've seen a lot of people do when I went and picked them up on a snowmobile and basically saved their lives. Without all these snowmobilers running around, they would have ended up dead, a good amount of them. If people don't come together when these crazy things happen, they're really in trouble very quickly. Snowstorm 77. Go look it up. Catch you guys later.